So why is Taipei unhappy about these, war of words we're hearing from the US, and what conversations have taken place?
Yes, Heidi. So Taipei officials obviously believe that Biden administration is going too far in terms of all these warnings. So recently we have heard all kinds of warnings from the U.S., including the timelines. We heard that 2027, 2025 could be the time that Taiwan could possibly face the invasion from China. And these kinds of warnings are really making Taipei officials more and more uneasy. They're particularly unhappy about the Commerce Secretary's comment calling that the U.S. dependence on Taiwan's chip supply chain is unsafe. They're also uneasy when the top Republican lawmaker Michael McCaul visited Taipei, and he said in this trip that the Taiwan semiconductor industry supply chain is a strategic asset and it's very vulnerable to invasion. And he said we don't have much time about this, and urging the U.S. to push out and move all the industry supply chains to the U.S. So these kinds of warnings have actually taken on new urgency right now, because there are some investors really listen to these warnings. Like Warren Buffett, for example, his Berkshire Hathaway cut over 80% of TSMC holdings in the fourth quarter last year, and that really hit the share price performance of TSMC. So Taipei government obviously afraid that these kind of U.S. warnings may affect the foreign investments in Taiwan and also stock investment. So that's why they have quietly told the U.S. counterparts to tone down the rhetoric about the risk of invasion for Taiwan.
Which is really interesting, isn't it, Cindy? Because you could say that Taiwan is sort of a victim of its own success. You're seeing this bipartisan support for the Taipei government. So what do officials actually want?
Yes, that's very true. So I believe that U.S. has a different opinion about many things, but there's one thing that bipartisan lawmakers have agreed on. That's any issue regarding to Taiwan. So Taipei government, in one way, is a victim of itself, because right now it has secured the bipartisan support from the Washington. It also needs to attract the diplomatic and military support from the U.S. and from other Western countries to help Taiwan to deter a possible invasion from China. But on the other hand, Taipei government certainly doesn't want the warnings that could scare off the investments, especially investors' investment or foreign investments. So Taipei officials, they have hoped the U.S. could make a balancing act between the two things. One is that we could diversify the supply chain to have more manufacturing centers in different parts of the world. But on the other hand, it also wants the U.S. could focus the efficiency part of the chip supply chain. It could have focused manufacturing in some parts of the world, for example, like Taiwan, so that we could have more efficient chip supply rather than just diversifying everything else. At the same time, the DPP government in Taiwan also need to face an upcoming presidential election in January. And right now it's facing accusation from opposition party like KMT to say it risks hollowing out Taiwan, but by asking TSMC to invest in the U.S.